Welcome to Mind Love Premium, episode 56. Today's episode is all about how to dictate your inner experience.
You got to get to a point where you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, meaning like if you're not happy with where your life is, where your relationships are, or where you're at in this world at this time, and you got to make something happen, you got to do something. So for example, like if we're only limited by our thoughts and our mind, is it possible to think bigger? And the answer is yes. Like thoughts are just frequencies and so forth. So you got to get to a point where you want more and you believe in your heart of hearts that you deserve the things that you desire.
Do you ever think that maybe we're overcomplicating things? Maybe creating a life that we love waking up for is simply the choice to take action and do it. If it's that simple, then why isn't it easier? Or why aren't more people doing it? The problem is, most of us have created habits of thought that aren't actually serving us. And yes, I said habits of thought. Our thoughts are actually just habits. But because they're in our minds, using our voices, we think that they are us. We think that that little voice telling us that we may fail, or it's too scary, or we don't have what it takes to make that big thing happen, we think that voice is our inner guidance trying to save us from pain. But guess what? That thought isn't you at all. It's loud and repetitive because you've let it go unchecked for so long. You listen to it and give it power, and then you build evidence outside your head in your real life that the things it's saying is true. I'll give you a kind of big example. When I was sexually assaulted as a teenager, it was my very first sexual experience. I hadn't had a boyfriend yet. I hadn't been taken on a date. I hadn't really been shown any real affection by a man. I didn't realize it until well into my 20s when I started to heal, but that sexual assault planted a seed in my mind that was all I was worth. So I led with my sexuality. I didn't expect much from guys. I tried to be the perfect woman, the one who loved sports and drank beer with the boys and laughed with them about their one-night conquests. I don't actually like watching sports that much, and I don't like beer, so it was all a lie. Well, guess who I attracted? I liked men who liked me for who I pretended to be, or men who wanted to hook up. I didn't even see this patterning until I started to create evidence for a new truth. I was doing yoga and I started reading books on personal development and spirituality, and I started down a path of self-love, which is a really long path, I might add. Well, as I started to see myself as I really am, with glimpses of how awesome I am and how much I have to offer, and I started tooting my own horn whenever possible, then I started to attract people who saw me the way I was beginning to see myself, just as I always had. I always attracted people who saw me the way that I saw myself. Just sometimes I didn't see myself in the way that I should have. Well, that's just one example, but life always seems to play out that way. When I believed that success was reserved for a certain kind of person and I was not that kind of person, my life experience reflected it. When I thought that I was unlovable, I attracted people who didn't really love me. When I thought the world was against me, I attracted situations that showed me that was true. Our inner experience dictates our outer experience. The way we experience ourselves determines the way we experience the world. So how do we start to dictate our inner experience so that we empower ourselves to build a life that we actually love? Well, that's what we're talking about today. Our guest is Craig Siegel. He is a mindset coach and host of the podcast, The CLS Experience. When the pandemic happened, Craig left his lucrative and stable job on Wall Street and went all in with his passion and purpose to help people revamp their mindset and alter their perspective. I love the energy of this episode. One of the biggest positive shifts I made in my journey as an entrepreneur was learning to bring in my feminine energy and allow myself to be and receive. But sometimes I just need to step back into my masculine to get shit done. And this is one of those episodes that inspires that go-getter attitude. 3 key things we will learn are how to tap into different parts of yourself to find strength, the power of taking massive aligned action, and how to take control of your inner experience to influence your outer experience. But before we get started with all that, if you don't already know about the Morning Mind Love, now is your little sign to sign up. If you haven't really gotten a hold of dictating your inner experience yet, the Morning Mind Love will help because it gives you something positive to focus on at the start of each day. And when you sign up, you get 2 free gifts: a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of self-reflective journaling to help you learn to dictate your inner experience. And it is all completely free. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up. Or if you're out and about, just text the word morning to 33777. And now let's welcome Craig Siegel to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa. I'm a big fan. You have my word. We'll absolutely manufacture magic together here today.
Well, I'm excited about that. And I am excited to hear your story because a lot of the people I talk to have started new ventures such a long time ago. And so we're seeing the results of what they've built over years and years. But you made a really big shift just during the pandemic. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's true. In the last 10, 11 years, I've been in Manhattan on Wall Street with my own businesses, which, as you can imagine, it's go, 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 especially in the Big Apple. You're not going 200 miles an hour, you're getting run over. So when the pandemic happened, I closed down my office for what I thought would be 2 weeks, because who knew back March 2020. And it occurred to me at that moment, Melissa, because I finally had just a second to reassess. And I take accountability for that. I should make more time for myself, but as a business owner, it's challenging. And I realized how unfulfilled and unhappy I had been. I was caught up in the rat race, so to speak, and I was miserable, for lack of better words. And so with that short 2-week window that I thought I had at that time, I put myself in the frequency to kind of ask myself the deep questions, like, what are my passions? What is my purpose? Like, what else is out there for me? And it didn't take long for me to acknowledge that I had been obsessed with personal development for the last 10 years, the mindset, studying NLP or neuro-linguistic programming and so forth. And then I said to myself, what if it's not just my passion? What if it's my purpose? Literally the next day on a run in Central Park, I pulled over. I brought the domain for cultivatelastingsymphony.com, or CLS, which is a play on my initials as well. And I hit the ground running, and the rest is history, as they like to say.
Oh, that infamous 2 weeks to slow the spread. That just turned everything upside down. I had a feeling it wasn't going to be 2 weeks. It's funny seeing my Facebook memories pop back up, and I'm like, how much you want to bet this goes on past a year? But
you know what? You're right. But for me, it helped because it provided a sense of urgency.
That is such a good point. And I do remember in the beginning feeling like, I totally believe that everything happens for a reason. This is going to be a great time to reflect and to maybe slow down a little bit, be more in my feminine energy than my masculine energy. And as with a lot of people, I found that they use that time in the beginning, but then the more the unknown popped up, the more their plans were kind of derailed, I should say. It seemed like people would go in waves of being like, this is exactly for me and this is hopeless. What's going on with the world? How did you balance that while starting something completely new?
You know what it is? It's just that I realized how miserable I was in my other business, and I made it very real for myself, Melissa. I said, now that I have this idea for CLS, or Cultivate Lasting Symphony, there's literally no excuses. Because the thing with me is, I had like an intuition that I was meant for more, so to speak, for years. And when I say meant for more, there's nothing wrong with what I was doing. It just, I wasn't exactly leaving a mark on this world. I wasn't putting a dent in the universe, so to speak. And so I made it very real. I associated going back to doing what I was doing as death. I made it that real. So now that I have this idea, if I choose to ignore that and go back doing what I'm doing, waking up every day, like not having my soul set on fire, like I might as well be dead, because that's like essentially I was drowning. I was dying a slow death. And so associating taking action with the new thing, right, that was pleasurable to me. So I like to change what I associate pain and pleasure to kind of guide myself on where I want to put my focus. And so understanding that there was no shot I was going back, now that I had this great idea and I know I can help people, now it's just a matter of strategy and tactics. And so I went all in.
So it sounds like you actually did some work to amplify those feelings, such as associating what you were doing before with death. Is that just you sitting on your own thinking, no, that's terrible. That's actually way worse than I even thought it was. Like talking yourself up to really talk yourself out of that? Or do you have a journaling exercise? What is that process like for you?
Yeah, I love these questions, by the way. I love the way you challenge me. I really appreciate that. I love to journal. I'm the biggest journal there is. So many different notebooks for different reasons. But with this specific incident, Melissa, it was just as simple as this. It's like, I don't want to do that anymore. I was unfulfilled. I was miserable. I was unhappy. So although safe, right? Like it's like a ship in the harbor. I knew the new thing would be challenging because anytime you're a beginner in anything, you're not going to be amazing at it, so to speak. So I was prepared. I have strategies to overcome challenges and whatnot, but I was just excited and exhilarating for the process because I realized just how I've never felt more aligned in my life to what I'm doing now, which is helping people, mindset coaching, the podcast, speaking engagements, and talking about transformations. I've never been more Craig Siegel than I am as I'm speaking to you here today. I'm so authentic right now. And I only know that realizing, looking back, I was a people pleaser. Like I was doing things that didn't set my soul on fire. So simply put, this is what we're going to do. I understood that there was going to be challenges and so forth. I planned for them. I played devil's advocate. Being a beginner, these are potential obstacles. And then I had solutions for them. And when I have that type of confidence, because I already put together a strategy, now it's just a matter of execution.
I like that way of looking at a strategy, whereas so many people think they need this huge business plan with every single thing answered. For you, it seems like you're just looking at what are the top obstacles that can happen with this, and let me just lay out a little plan so that in case they come up, I know what to do, and it gives you this renewed confidence moving forward in general. So it does sound a little bit more simple, am I right?
Absolutely, because a lot of things, most reasons why people quit is because of fear and doubt. So for example, like they fear what people might think of them if they fail, or once they have challenges, they start to doubt themselves. By utilizing this strategy, which I learned when I was studying NLP and the mindset, essentially it's what Walt Disney used to launch Disneyland and a bunch of other epic people. I think Steve Jobs had used some of this stuff with Apple and so forth. Essentially, you have three different perspectives, or as I like to say, three different chairs in a room: the dreamer, the critic, and the realist. When you step into that dreamer perspective, it's the little kid in you. I mean, your biggest imagination. You think as big as you possibly can. So for me, bigger than Tony Robbins, selling out stadiums, 100,000 plus, the biggest podcast on the planet. And again, not to be selfishly like for Craig, this is just so I can help as many people as I can. Then you come in as the second perspective, which is the critic. It's the first time you give yourself full permission to shred yourself to smithereens. It's not going to work because of this. You don't have a social media following. You're not that comfortable speaking in front of people. What's your testimonial and so forth. And then as the realist, as in the third chair, you come in, you're like, okay, the dreamer wanted to do this. The critics presented these obstacles. As the realist, here's how we can actually make this work. And by utilizing that strategy, I was just prepared for all potential challenges that came my way. And that gave me a ton of confidence.
What I love about that is it reminds me of Napoleon Hill's idea of the mastermind, where he talks about taking people that you know really well, and it doesn't mean you don't even need to know them in person. It could just be that you've studied them, you've studied what they've done. You can almost tap into their mindset, and then you sit alone with yourself and have a mastermind with these ideas of people. Only you are, instead of finding other people that are outside of you, you're finding the different versions of you, the playful side, the driven side. So I think that sounds super effective.
Yeah, and you know what? It's actually also fun. And I think that when you're building a business, you're an entrepreneur, really anything, but specifically this stuff, where it's a little bit of a roller coaster, especially in the beginning, there's ups and downs. You got to have fun with the process, and utilizing this exercise is actually fun to me.
So you were even able to find success in a job that you now look back and associate with death. So that does speak to the kind of person that you are, very driven, very probably does what he says he's going to do. And a lot of people struggle with that. They let the indecision weigh them down, or they let that doubt hold them back. And so I'm curious, were you always like that, or have you employed certain practices to get around your own mindset?
Yes, so I became Craig 2.0 when I graduated college and I got to Wall Street and I started studying the mind. And essentially, I learned how to learn. I don't mean this, the curriculums they give you in school where, like study math or this. Like, I started learning how the mindset works and how you can change your perspective. And so once I did that, I realized that I had options. I wasn't just born a certain way. I could make adjustments, so to speak. And so I had a ton of success on Wall Street, and then the second business that we were just speaking about, I also utilized the same mindset to go from being unable to run a mile without stopping to running 4 marathons that very same year. And so I've had these tools in my toolbox, my repertoire, so to speak, for the last 5 to 10 years, and obviously continue to sharpen the axe and get better at them. But this gives me just so much confidence moving forward. And to answer your question, yeah, that's how I've been in my adult life. I think it comes down to integrity also. Like, if you're responsible or you say you're going to do something, you follow through and you do it. And it's not so much about what other people think, it's for yourself. Make sure that you're setting a high standard to yourself and you follow through with that, because as you know, and I'm sure the audience as well, it's a slippery slope. If you start saying, I don't want to show up today, or I'm not really into this job, so I'm just going to half-ask it, then it starts to go into your subconscious, and that could be your way of life, so to speak. And that's obviously something we want to avoid.
That is one thing I always share, where when I have an idea, I could let doubt hold me back forever. But what I've now understand is that every time that I don't move closer towards that goal and I stay where I am building evidence or building a personal belief, a self-belief that I'm the type of person that does not take action. And so even if I don't know exactly where I'm going, I can always take that first step, because just that small thing is building a new self-belief, and it makes it that much more likely that I take the step right after that.
That's it. Just worry about the 200 feet in front of you, and then the next 200 feet, and the next 200 feet, and it'll start to play out for you, and the seas will begin to part. I love that you said that.
So your first career was on Wall Street, where you did have a ton of success, but then you later realized that it wasn't something that you were passionate about at all. What do you think would have helped give you clarity earlier on to find something that was in alignment from the start? Or do you think you needed to go through that whole experience to figure that out?
I think both. I think that you have to go through stuff in life to understand not so much as to what you want, but what you don't want, right? And when you start manufacturing wealth and making money, you realize that money's not everything. And you want your soul to be on fire. You want to feel alive. You want to wake up every day legit. People always ask me, like, how am I so energetic and excited every single day? It's because I love this stuff. I'm obsessed with CLS and the mindset stuff and the clients and all of it. I love it so much. And look, I would show up to the previous businesses and so forth, but it was much more challenging. Like, even like, I know it's cliche, but living in a state of gratitude, right? Like right now, if I have a rough day or something bothers me, it's just a moment in time. We shrug it off and we look at the big picture, and that looks good. But when you're doing something you don't like, it's tough to stay so grateful, right? It's like if you have a crappy day, yes, you have your health, but like, what are you so grateful for? Like, you're still going to wake up tomorrow and go back to that same situation. So the bottom line is, I think I had to go through a lot of this stuff to finally realize that I need to be doing something that I gravitate towards, that sets my soul on fire, to put a dent in this universe, to share my gifts with the world. The only other thing I'll say to you, and I'll play little devil's advocate, is as follows. If I had mentorship at an earlier age, like if I had a mentor like I do to people now years back, maybe they would have helped guided me in locating or identifying, utilizing my gifts more. But I don't regret anything.
Yeah, I'm the same way. You could look at my speckled history and think she's got to at least regret that thing. And sometimes, yeah, it seems like it might have been easier if the path was smoother. But I don't think I would have learned my lesson as deeply as I ended up learning it. And so it's what drives me every single day. But even in a job that I am so passionate about, where it's even hard to call it a job, mind love is just kind of what I do. It's the mark that I'm leaving on this world. But there are times where maybe the task is mundane, or I have so many other things going on where it feels overwhelming, or something personal's happening and I don't feel as enthusiastic this day. How do you get through those days? Do you use that as a sign to take a rest day, take a day off, kind of utilize self-care, or do you utilize mindset tricks to push through?
A little bit of both. And to be honest with you, I need to do a little bit better at setting boundaries. So maybe I should take more of a break. But CLS is still relatively new. We've had a ton of success and very humbled by it, but it's still fresh and exciting and new. So like, I don't really take days off. I know that's not the sexiest answer, and it's probably not what the audience should be hearing right now because I'm not suggesting it. But when you start something that's so beautiful and you're so into, you just want to go and build it. So yeah, like I hang out with my family. My brother, my best friend, has a little baby, my nephew who just turned 1 a couple months back. Spend time with them, but ultimately I'm spending some time on building the brand at least every single day. With that being said, I think that everyone is different in regards to this. Like, you have to use what works for you, right? Like, yes, there's mindset tools that you can use to elevate your state so that you could stay on fire longer. But at the same time, like, if you're feeling a little bit burnt out, you don't want to force that because then you'll start to resent what you're doing. And obviously we don't want that. So I think it's a little bit of give and take depending upon the person and depending upon the situation as well.
I have spent the last decade figuring out how to listen to my body and know when I need to take a break, because I am the type of person that will get burnt out and I almost feel like I'm closed in, even when it's something that I'm totally in alignment with. So I now know when to check in with myself and I schedule that in now. And it's funny because oftentimes as a woman, it goes with my cycle or it goes with my moods. But one of the things that I could get better at is employing some of those mindset tools that keeps me elevated for longer, that lights me on fire. So I'd love for you to share some of those with us.
Yeah, it's a great question. So utilizing different tools such as modeling and anchoring, where you can tap into the magic of role models, so to speak. Like, it could be fictional characters, movie stars, athletes, someone from a book. It could be your dad, whoever the case may be. You can kind of gauge what these people do great, and you can tap into that. So for example, when I first got to Wall Street, and I've said this often, like, I didn't have a ton of confidence. I was a rookie. I was a fish out of water. I would tap into and model my inner 007 James Bond. And from that type of state, I was able to exude more confidence. I walked with a swagger. I didn't let the rebuttals bother me so much because I was modeling James Bond. And just to be clear, like, sometimes it's misconstrued here. Doesn't mean I'm taking over these people's identities. I'm just simply tapping into things that these people do well. So it kind of takes the emotion out of it. I'm not like, for example, if I'm on a call with a big prospect when I was on Wall Street, instead of being Craig for that moment, I'm modeling James Bond. How would this guy act in this situation? He'd be very assertive and so forth. And so tapping into things like that, and then also anchoring, where you find an exhilarating moment from your past. For me, it might be about 1.5 years ago when I crossed the finish line on my last marathon in the pouring rain. I had a great time. It was my best ever. I gave my brother a hug. I remember seeing everyone it was raining out with their ponchos. I could tap into that moment on a very deep level and then bring myself back. And then ultimately, my state is elevated a couple points. So for example, if I was a 7, now I'm a 10. And then, as you know, whatever you step into from an elevated state, it's not what can I do, it's what can't you do. So those are tool techniques that you can use at your disposal right there.
I love that, because the whole idea of modeling is very similar, if not the same, as the thing you said when we're doing the sort of modeling with ourselves, with those 3 perspectives, the dreamer, the doer, I forget which the perspectives were, but and so
the critic.
The critic.
Yes.
Yeah, and so it's using those parts of ourselves as the model in the same technique that you just went over with us, right?
Yep, 100%. That's exactly right. So in those situations, I'd be modeling my best self in those scenarios. For this one, I might be modeling different human beings, but the concept is the same. You want to tap into someone who's got magic.
It's funny because I have heard from people before where I have given them a tool that's similar to that, and the response is, Well, that's not my personality. And I think what people don't always realize is that their personality is just a series of habits that they've allowed themselves to develop over years and years. You know, there are glimmers, I think, of personality, of character, but most of what we think is our personality is really just those habits, the things that we're doing all the time. And so when we step into something almost pretending to be somebody else or to be a different version of ourselves or to be the person we wished we could be, that's just the first step in creating the new habit.
That's exactly right. And to be honest with you, I've gotten those same objections. And this is what I want to make very clear. We're not telling you to take over their identity, right? Like, when I go to bed at night, or like I look myself in the mirror before I go to sleep, like I'm still Craig. I'm not 007 or Arnold Schwarzenegger, whatever the case may be. I'm just simply utilizing people that have had success in this world and seeing what they did well. If we don't tap into that, then the joke's on us. I mean, it's no different than when Beyonce is on stage, she taps into what she calls Sasha Fierce. That's like her crazy, energetic, wild performing self. And then when she's off stage, she's back to herself, which is a little bit more low key. It's the same concepts. For those people out there, I would say challenge yourself. See if you can put your ego aside a little bit and embrace and acknowledge that some people who have had success have done something right. What is it that they were doing? What was their thought process? Maybe if I utilize a similar strategy, I can also have that success. And that's really that.
I have two alter egos. Mo is my successful one. She's the one who just gets shit done, doesn't care what people think. And Clementine, Clementine I've had since college, and she's the screw up. She's the one who has the tendency to self-sabotage. And so Mo is always getting on Clementine to get her shit together.
That's awesome. Yeah, but at least you can separate them. So you know you want to tap into Mo.
Yes. And for me, it was actually helpful to have the self-sabotage version of myself as well, because it gave a name and it helped me to identify with that version of me less. Whereas in my earlier 20s, I thought I was her. I thought maybe I was a little bit too ADD to have real success. Maybe I was the type of person that found big success in the beginning, but I couldn't sustain it. And so when I gave her a name, it allowed me to see her as something separate from me, as just more of a belief system. And if I could create her, then I could create a different, more successful, more driven version of me at the same time.
That's right. I love that. Makes perfect sense.
So you had started this new venture, Cultivating Lasting Symphony, and you've already been finding so much success during a time where a lot of people were using it as like, oh, maybe I should slow down. Maybe I should not launch anything because of what's happening in the world. What was your thought process? Why didn't you let the world, the experience that was going on around you affect what you wanted to do?
I just had a sense of urgency. I said, look, the pandemic taught me one thing specifically that stood out. It's just how unpredictable the world can be. And not to sound too deep, but we're not going to be here forever. Like, we don't get a sequel at this. We don't get to do this thing twice. So I need to stop acting like I am. And I had a sense of urgency. I made every second, every moment count of every day, put together strategies, and I just hit the ground running. And I wasn't afraid to fail, even though I didn't think I would, because I've had success in different areas of things that I wasn't even necessarily great at, but I adapted. This thing is actually very natural to me, talking about the mindset and like speaking, this, that, and the other thing. So I knew that I would make it work. So I just wanted to make every second count. And I saw other people, what they were doing in the beginning of the pandemic. And look, I don't want to be judgmental, but I saw a lot of people like watching a lot of Netflix or day drinking and stuff like this. And I just said to myself, like, that's not me. I have a window here to make something happen. And that's something I can control. So I made the most use of the extra time that I had.
I am hearing a lot of things like, that's not me, or this is who I am. And I know from my own self-work that it's those self-beliefs that are the things that drive me even more so than a goal. Because if I'm not the type of person that drinks during the day, then I'm not going to drink during the day. I don't think I should drink today, or it's probably not good for me, because it always leaves an opening for doing something else. And so while a lot of people though aren't quite there yet. they might not be the type of person that says, I'm not the type of person to do this, or they don't see themselves in that way so clearly. What are your tips for building the self-beliefs that are needed for the person that you want to become?
How bad do you want it? And also, like, look yourself in the mirror and say this, like, why not you? Why not you? If it's not you, it's going to be someone else. Like, you got to get to a point where, or maybe hopefully you don't, right? But you got to get to a point where you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. Meaning, like, if you're not happy with where your life is, where your relationships are, or where you're at in this world at this time, and you got to make something happen, you got to do something. Like, so for example, like, if we're only limited by our thoughts and our mind, is it possible to think bigger? And the answer is yes. Like, thoughts are just frequencies and so forth. So you got to get to a point where you want more and you believe in your heart of hearts that you deserve the things that you desire. You know, it's tough to teach someone like that inner drive. You have to want it, so to speak. There's definitely tools that you can utilize to increase your confidence, your self-belief, and stuff like that. Absolutely, 100%. But it's hard to make someone want to get stuff done. Like, you have to have that fire in you. And then from there, you know, there's always going to be a trail of things that people have done so you can kind of emulate, or successful tips that you can use. But you got to feel that in your gut that you know you're destined for a little bit more. You want to make a dent in this universe, so to speak. And then from there, we can obviously work on the self-belief.
So when fear or doubt does creep in, which I don't think any of us are really immune to, it's just we react differently. The most successful people in the world react differently to that fear and doubt. What is your process? Is it just taking action through it, or is it employing some of these self-talk exercises to change your inner world?
There's so many different tools. Like, for example, I'm practicing right now a lot mindfulness, like being mindful. Like, just take a second, forget about 5 minutes from now, forget about 5 minutes ago. Like, let's just be in this moment right now. What's actually going on here? And if it's something that we're scared, like, for example, getting on stage to speak in front of people, right? For that, we can use our toolbox. We can utilize modeling. We can emulate someone who speaks or has a ton of confidence in that type of environment. In regards to, you know, doubt and stuff like that, like, look, if we can change our perspective on different things, then what we look at changes. So perspective is really everything in life. Like, if you just tilt your head and just look at it from a different lens, so to speak, you might look at the entire situation differently. So, for example, like, when I was getting up and running and it was time to do the podcast, because that was one of the lanes in the 10-lane highway, and we wanted to get big names on, you know, to grow the audience, so to speak. It was like, well, why would they want to be on our show? Like, we only just started this brand, so to speak. And then the other perspective was, well, they should be saying thank you very much when they be on the show, because we're going to put on a hell of a conversation for them. We're going to share it, and a lot of people are going to get a ton of value from it. So it's in these big guests, big interest, but we'll never know if we don't ask them, because a closed mouth doesn't get fed. So you got to be persistent. You got to reach out. You have to do your homework so you have a good conversation with them, so to speak, and then they have a good time. You build rapport. They're inclined to share it and so forth. So what I did with that specific example was I just literally looked at it from a different perspective. And I think perspective is everything.
I love that, because that was going to be one of my questions, because I know you have had some really big names that I am so interested to hear, like Suzanne Summers and Alicia Silverstone, like my idol when I was a kid.
Great,
So,
yeah, legends,
and
icons.
and so all you did was shift your mindset and take the risk of reaching out to them, knowing that you had something to offer, that it was more of a mutual beneficial ask than it was asking a favor, right?
That's exactly right. You nailed it.
Well, that's awesome. Now I know the next two guests that I'm going to try to get.
And Melissa, I just want to say this, like, you can't lose what you don't have, right? So if I don't ask, I don't, like, it is what it is. I'm in the same spot. But if I ask and they say no, I didn't have it anyway. So by utilizing that thought, I changed my perspective and I'm more aggressive, respectfully, of course. and I just want to take shots. And I know that I want to make a major mark on this world, and collaborating with legends and icons like that and telling great stories is a part of the process. So for the audience listening, I think this is very valuable. You can't lose what you don't have, and a closed mouth doesn't get fed. So we don't know how long we're going to be here. Take those shots.
I love that. It's so inspiring. I know for me, even, there's been a number of people that I've had on this show that I'm like, they're on my top 5 bucket list, but I'm going to reach out. And I have had a lot of success doing that. And so sometimes, though, it's a conversation like this where I realize, wow, I was reaching for this person, thinking that this person would be the pinnacle. But there are so many other people that might be even cooler. And I don't know, there's also the realizing when I am ranking people and what that is doing to my own worth. Like, am I saying, oh, this is a big guest, but this guest is bigger? And if I'm looking at people as almost idols, then how is that reflecting back onto me? Am I saying that I'm not as big as them when really we're all just humans trying to figure out this world?
That's a very interesting and dynamic conversation. So, like when I first started getting these, as I like to call them, juggernauts on the show, I would speak to them like they were a little bit superior and more like, respect and humble, like looking up to them. But now I have the confidence. Like, this isn't my first rodeo. I've had big names on here. I'm having great conversations. The podcast has record downloads. People are sharing it and loving it. So now when I speak to them, I speak eye to eye with them. If anything, I try to be the authority figure, not in a disrespectful way by any means, but just understand, like, I know what I'm doing, and we've done a great job so far. And like you said earlier, it's a win-win. It's mutually beneficial.
I realized that while living in LA, because you just meet celebrities when you're living in LA for a long period of time, especially in your 20s when you're going out a lot. And I noticed that how I presented myself 100% affected the way I was perceived. And that should seem obvious, but I don't think it always is to people, because they don't take the moment to reflect on how they're viewing themselves before they step into an interaction like that. And we can go back to some of the practices that you said where you use the modeling of like, okay, I'm going to be James Bond in this moment, or what would make me feel more confident in this interaction? Do I have to pretend to be somebody else? Do I have to tap into a part of my brain that's not often used? Do I have to tap into an old version of me? Whatever it is. But again, it's that power to shift our perspective and just, I think of it as scrolling through a Rolodex of perspectives. That's how I always look at life, where I'm like, why do I feel like this right now? I don't feel that good. Can I look at it in a different way that feels a little bit more empowering? Or what do I want to feel right now? What perspective would allow me to feel that? And then I just start thinking that way. And before I know it, I have moved into a whole different experience of that moment. But I will say that every now and then I find myself hitting resistance. There's almost like this version of me that's like, I don't want to look at this empowering right now, or no, I don't want to have the energy right now. And I don't know where that comes from, because I obviously want to have the energy or want to feel empowered. Do you ever come up against that resistance, either in yourself or your clients, and how do you move through it?
Yeah, I think it's perfectly natural. I think that what you just touched upon is gold, and I love that you did, because the way you perceive yourself is giving off a frequency to the rest of the world. So if you're feeling a little, I mean, look, this goes back to like when I started understanding like how to have game when it comes to like approaching the opposite sex, right? Like, this is a little off topic, but like if I were to approach a pretty girl at the bar and I went in there like unsure of myself, like afraid to make eye contact, like she's gonna sniff that out in 2 seconds. But if I walk over there super confident, like it's a privilege for her to speak to me, and I mean that respectfully, just to to build some confidence, self-belief. Then all of a sudden she's much more engaged to try to get my attention and so forth. And so I think what you touch upon is so beautiful and so true. Depending upon how you perceive yourself is how the world is going to perceive you, because everything in life is cause and effect. So if you go out in the world and you act swiftly and you act confident, like you've been there before, people will react to that. And on the flip side, right, if you go out there like very timid, unsure of yourself, people will react to that as well. So I love that you brought that up, and I think it's so important and valuable and deep, and people don't talk about this enough. That's why the inner work, right, and really working on your confidence and self-belief, being assertive, not cocky, confident. It does everything for us in life, and as a result, you know, we'll be playing the game of life, so to speak, in a much more advantageous way. We'll kind of be looking down at problems instead of looking up at them. So I love that you touch upon that.
Well, I'm actually glad that you moved into this idea of dating, because I think that right now what's being highlighted for a lot of people is the importance of relationships. And we all know whether it's building a business or having a baby, it takes a village. Everything seems to take a village, but we all seem to isolate ourselves more than we need to, whether it is when we're building a business, when we're figuring out what we want to do, or building a team, or finding the person that we want to spend time with. So I'm curious, what is your approach to relationships? And I mean that in all aspects of the people that you're choosing to build a team with, the people that you're choosing to reach out to, the people that you're really just bringing in closer to your life.
Phenomenal question. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I just want to acknowledge you for that, and I love what we're talking about. In regards to the relationships, I really have to feel aligned with that person's core values. So like my team, for example, Alexandra, Jessica, who you just met, like I love those ladies. Like I would take a bullet for them. I would die for them. They believe in the vision. We're a unit. CLS is just as much theirs as it is mine in my head. And I treat them with that type of respect, and I build them up, and we have each other's back. And that's so important. And I also understand it's so valuable and so hard to find loyalty in people that you can trust. So for the audience listening, when you do, treat them right. In regards to relationships, look, since I really went all in with my passion and purpose, which is CLS, I've lost a lot of relationships from my past. People that and I say this respectfully, I just outgrew. Doesn't mean I'm right, they're wrong. Just means I'm doing different things right now. I have different goals, and I'm in a different space, a different season of life, so to speak. And so a lot of the people from my past aren't in that season. A lot of them are kind of just doing the same thing they've always done, and power to them. I'm just in a different frequency, and so I want to surround myself with like-minded individuals like you, Melissa, or should I say Mo, people that are looking to grow and just be the best version of themselves. That's what I'm addicted to.
So when you are building a movement like Cultivating Lasting Symphony, how do you find the people that are in alignment with what you're doing? What was that process like for you?
When you say find the people, do you mean like clients, team members, podcast guests? What do you mean?
Yeah, all of it. How do you portray your frequency to the point that those in alignment find you? Is it the way that you word a hiring ad? Do you meet them through people? What is that process like?
Yeah, so really it's the message I'm sending the community. The CLS community is growing very rapidly. They're so loyal and engaging, as I'm sure you saw on social media. It's very important that every single post, everything I do, every single Instagram story, everyone I have on the podcast is aligned with the message that I'm trying to send to my community. I'm not everyone's cup of tea, Melissa. I'm not everyone's cup of whiskey. I get that. But I want to be very consistent with the message that I do send. And certain people will love that and certain people won't. And that's okay. Better off knowing sooner than later, right? So I stick to the people that can vibe with my message, so to speak. Same energy.
Well, thank you for the energy that you've brought to this episode. I can just tell in just our conversation, you're just so clear and concise, and that clarity is something that so many listeners are looking for. And then just the drive to go through with the plan that you've laid out is really admirable. So thank you for the energy that you've added to this planet. And for listeners that are interested in learning more about you and your movement, where's the best place for them to connect?
Yeah, and thank you so much for those kind words. I feel the same about you. I really dig your energy. I'm a fan. I love what you have going on, and I'm very confident this won't be the last time that you and I collaborate. Where I hang out the most on social media, I would say, is Instagram at Craig Siegel _CLS. On Facebook, Craig Siegel. the website, cultivatelastingsymphony.com, and of course, anywhere you listen to podcasts, the CLS Experience. Come stop by and say hello. I don't bite.
All the links mentioned in this episode will be at mindlove.com/x56. So today, your challenge is a challenge that I did before I started Mind Love that really, really changed my life. If you've been listening for a while, you'll probably recognize this exercise, and you may have even done it before. But I will tell you that I revisit this exercise pretty often because it's not like you do it once and everything's perfect from there forth. We have new things that we need to catch and reframe. So here's the exercise. I want you to carry around a notebook for anywhere from an hour to 3 days. You can even do it longer if you want. I recommend at least 1 day though. And when a limiting belief comes into your head, and this is anything negative, fear-based, something limiting what you think is possible, I want you to write it down. And before you move on, cross it out and reframe it into something more empowering. So one of the big ones that popped up for me was I had built a belief that I was too ADD to finish anything, which is interesting because I used to finish everything when I was younger, and then something about living life on my own, going to college, starting my own projects without the structure of somebody telling me what to do, I just never quite finished. I'd have the best intentions, but I just wouldn't do it. Well, I realized I was holding on to this belief. Somehow this belief popped up right after my dad died. And I think it was that part of me was finding similarities between me and him. And I saw a lot of unfinished projects from him when his life ended. And so maybe it was almost some interesting subconscious form of honoring him that I took on that story. I did know that I had ADD. I had just often learned to overcome it or move through it until after this, and somehow it overwhelmed me. But of course, it could have been a number of environmental or circumstantial factors, but I had that belief. Long story short, I crossed it out and wrote, "When I am passionate about something, I always follow through." And I changed this to a number of different affirmations that I started to use whenever that would pop up. Whenever I'm like, am I going to finish this? Yes, I'm going to finish this because I know how much it means to me. Yes, I'm going to finish this because I'm building a belief that I am somebody who finishes things. Yes, I am somebody who finishes things. And what do you know? I finished the podcasting course and I launched Mind Love. So I want you to have that same kind of a success. And often it's just about catching those limited beliefs, and using this notebook and writing them down will help you to become more aware of the subconscious thoughts that are driving your behavior. So let me know how it goes. Reach out to me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa. I do want to say thank you so much to all my premium members. You are my soul family, and I'm so thankful for your support. You keep Mind Love going. And that is all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next time.